Good evening, everyone. I'm David Shepherd, and welcome to my Thursday's Facebook Live. Except you've probably already worked out that we're not actually live this evening. Last Thursday, we were doing our Master Practitioner training in our hotel in Hammersmith, and the internet went down in the hotel. We also had no 4G signal. So we were cut off around about a couple of minutes into my Facebook Live last week. We're in the same hotel this week, during the second week of our Master Practitioner training, and potentially we could have had the same problem again tomorrow night. So the Master Practitioners are doing their breakthrough sessions today. So I've come over to the studio so that I could record the content for tomorrow night's Facebook Live, in inverted commas, so we could actually make sure that our regular viewers actually had something to watch. So welcome. For those of you that are new, every Thursday at 7 p.m. 1900, whatever in London, which is BST at the moment, British Summer Time, or GMT, or 1800 UTC, which is Universal Time, then I do a Facebook Live about NLP, hypnosis, timeline therapy, or HUNA. And last week, which is the broadcast that we lost, I was going to talk about something that I use all the time as a speaker and a presenter, but it goes way beyond that, in that I'm quite often asked, what is the most important thing I've learnt to use as a speaker, presenter, or a trainer? And there are two things that stick out of my mind. And one of them is what I use, and I call it structuring your genius. Over the last, what would it be, 27 years that I've been in the coaching and the personal development marketplace, I have had the honor and the privilege of meeting a good number of people that you would honestly call geniuses. One of the things that I found in common with many of them, though, was they had no idea how to get what they got in here into somebody else's mind, into somebody else's brain. They didn't know how to structure their genius in a way that they could transfer it, that they could communicate it effectively. And so that's what I want to share with you this evening. I teach it on Presenting Magically. I'll be teaching it next week on our Speakers of Influence. It is the way that I structure every single speech, presentation, and training. It's also how I structure sales proposals. It's how I structure all brochures, websites, all manner of things. It really is that universally powerful. And the promise that I give on Presenting Magically and on Speakers of Influence is this. Imagine you were wandering through the corridors of power where you work, where you do your business. And let's say the business owner, the CEO, comes to you and says, I think the board would be really interested in that project or that work you've been doing. Will you do a presentation for them? And you know in an instant that this is possibly the most important presentation of your business or your career to date. So eagerly you accept the offer and ask, when would you like me to do it? And the CEO or business owner says, well, they're just finishing tea, they're just finishing coffee. How about in 5 minutes? Imagine knowing at that point in time that even with just 5 minutes notice, you could do a perfectly structured presentation that would fit everybody's learning style, everybody's data acquisition style in the room, even though you've never met them before. And you know, when I've got a group in Presenting Magically or Speakers of Influence, I then say, for how many of you here would being able to do that have value for you? And of course, every single hand in the house, in the room, goes up. And that's what I'm going to share with you this evening. It's called the format system. And to give you a little bit of information as to what the format system is and where it came from. The format system was discovered or created or invented by Bernice McCarthy. Bernice McCarthy was an American educationalist working with children. And she realized that different children had different learning styles. And she identified that there were 4 main learning styles. And each of these 4 learning styles was driven by a question. What she thought when she first discovered it was that she would identify what a child's preferred learning style is, because we all have all 4, but we have one which is a preference. She would identify what the child's preferred learning style was, and then split the year into 4 streams for each of the learning styles and teach the children in accordance with their preferred learning style. Fortunately, I think she didn't actually do that. And what she did was she kept all the children together, but structured the class, structured the teaching, so that no matter which one of these 4 learning styles a child had, it was being satisfied and it was being met. And they were also getting the other 3, because that dramatically enriches our learning experience and also increases our flexibility and our ability to learn. So that's a little bit of information, a little bit of history as to where the format system comes from. So let's get into some of the content now. So the format system has 4 quadrants, and these 4 quadrants go with the particular learning styles, and they're driven by a particular question, a particular inquiry. The first quadrant is driven by the question why, the second by the question what, the third by the question how, and the fourth by the question what if. So people in this particular quadrant here need to be involved. They need personal reasons why they should listen, why they should be involved in the speech, the presentation, or the training. In putting it bluntly, they need to be sold. You need to tell them why they should listen to this and why not do other things. Their favorite radio station is WIIFM, What's in It for Me. They need to be given personal reasons. They need to be motivated to move into the other quadrants, which is why this one is the first quadrant that we need to deal with. In fact, I used the format system when I was structuring this presentation, when I said, so if you were able to do a perfectly structured presentation with 5 minutes notice, it was the most important presentation you'd done in your career and business at this particular point in time, how many of you would have value in that? Then that's the why. My guess is at that point in time you went, yes, we've now got you bought in, you're sold. So this is vitally important if you do business presentations, business speeches, business trainings, because many people are in your room for one reason and one reason only. They've been told that they've got to be there. My public trainings, I don't have that, because people have made their own decisions, they've invested their own money, they're investing their own time for being there. Like the people on my Master Practitioner training over this last 2 weeks. All I need to do is get them to remember why they made that investment, and it fires off the why. In a business training, though, you've got to really hit this one off, because for those people in this quadrant, which is around about 30-35% of any general audience, they won't move anywhere else until they have a why. At best, they're not going to learn anything or be involved. At worst, they're going to get bored and become disruptive. So how do we do this? What we do is we mind read. What is in it for this individual? Personal reasons, not business reasons, personal reasons. You could have people there going, well, I can think why my company has sent me here. I can think why my boss wants me here. But why would I want to actually get involved in the room? Very, very important. Then we move to the second quadrant. For these people, information is power. Information is king. The more they know, the more facts, the more data, the more information they have, they believe that they have more power. So these people are interested in what the experts think. They're interested in the research, the theory, the statistics, all of that kind of stuff. You can spot these people in a presentation, a speech, or a training because they're writing down every single word that you say. And they think that a presentation or a speech is great if they can't keep up with the notes and their pen is literally smoking. I see them on the Master Practitioner training because obviously we cover a lot in 2 weeks. And the first thing that they do when they come in is they look at the thickness of the manual, which is around about that thick, and they go, wow, we are going to be learning so much information over these 2 weeks. This is a great training. These are also the people that if you do provide them with a manual or a notebook or workbook, is when you open up your presentation, your speech, your training, they're leafing forward to see what they're going to be learning and what you're going to be covering later on. Information is king. Facts, figures, stats, logic, rationale, theory. Yeah. Then we move to the third quadrant, which is driven by the question how. Pragmatists. Very much in the present moment. How can I use what you're talking about right now in my current situation? In no way, shape or form future-oriented. How can I use it right now? These people are, they love the demos in your trainings. They love the exercises. These people go, David, we don't need to do an exercise. I've got it now. I understand it. You know, I've got the theory. But as we know, in theory, there's little difference between theory and practice. In practice, there's a huge difference between theory and practice. So these people here need to actually do it. Thinking, doing. These people actually need to do it and be coached through it. That's the way that they learn best. If you're a trainer like me, then the people who have this as their preference come up to you after an exercise and go, David, thanks for that exercise. I really wasn't sure that I got it. But now I've done the exercise, I know I've got it now. Thank you very much. So very much into pragmatics and doing. In a business presentation, where you might not have a demo or you might not have an exercise, this part of the presentation is the step-by-step process of how they would apply the information that you've given them here to be able to get the why. So it's the rollout plan, it's the step-by-step process of the application of the theory. Now we get to the what if, the fourth quadrant. These people are very future oriented. They're very, but what if this? What if this? What if this? What if I had a client with this? What if this didn't happen? What if this happened? So these are very looking for hidden opportunities, consequences, etc. in the future. As a trainer, and I know we've got some trainers who are watching this, I used to wonder what was happening. I'd go to watch an exercise. I'd set up an exercise here, and I'd find a particular group that were doing an exercise which bore absolutely no resemblance to the exercise that I'd actually set up. And I'd wander over to them and go like, okay, so what are you doing? And they go, well, now, you see, we were wondering what would happen if we missed out that step, or we integrated this exercise with the last exercise. Because there's no point in doing the exercise as you set it up, David, because we know that would work. So what we're doing is we're experimenting. So they learn by trial and error. They learn by experimentation. In your presentation, speech, or training, this would be your Q&A. And if you've done these three here sufficiently, the only questions you'll get are from people that have that as their preference, and all of the questions will be what-if questions. It's also here where you would do your rousing, motivational, future pace out at the end of your presentation. So let's look at how we could go about putting these things together in an overall template. Because, you know, here's the great thing about this. It means that you can do a perfectly structured presentation on the fly by remembering just 5 questions. So let's look at now how we would go about using the format system. So here's our entire presentation, whether it be a 5-minute presentation, a 30-minute keynote, a 1-hour motivational speaking session, or an hour and a half training segment, doesn't matter. And what we start out with is what I call the big what. This is what I'm going to talk to you about today, the subject, setting the frame, creating a pot that they can hold all this stuff into. Then we go into why they would want this information. How big is the why? Well, you know, I like to do that thing as far as like, for how many people, if you were to get bop, 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 would there be value in that? Get all the hands up in the room, you've done your why. If you've only got half the hands up in the room, you need to do more why. So variable depending on the group. Once we've got our why established and we've got people in the room, then we're going to do what I would call the detailed what. What's this all about? What's the facts? What's the figures? What's the statistics? What's the research, etc. Once we've done that, we now go into the how, which in a training could be a demo, demonstrating how you would do it, would be the exercises. And in a business presentation in general would be the kind of rollout plan. This is what we need to do to achieve the results that we want. Once we've done that bit, then we go into the what if. And the what if is Q&A. Now, the important thing here is that you set up right at the beginning that there will be time at the end for questions, and that you ask people to hold their questions until you get here. Here's why you'd want to do that. Because whilst you're in here, these people will start raising their hands going, well, that's all very well and good, David, but how am I going to use this in my day-to-day business? Well, you know, what are the statistics? What are the facts, the figures, etc.? But what if that doesn't work? And if you allow that, then your presentation, your training, and your speech will be structured by your audience. It will be complete chaos. So this is the only place that we actually take Q&A, and we ask people to hold them, because the why people will get their questions answered, the what people have their questions answered, the how people will get their questions answered. So when we get here, the only questions we should have are what if questions, future oriented. Then we've got our, what I would call our motivational close, which I'm going to take you through in detail. Okay. Now, the thing with this is that ultimately, all we've got to do is remember these questions. We could even use them as rhetorical questions to remind ourselves. So let me tell you what we're going to talk about today. Now, I know some of you will be wondering, well, why would I want to know that? Let me tell you why. Others in the audience will be wondering, okay, that's great, but what's the information? What's the figures? What's the stats? What's the research? What's the theory, etc.? Others of you will be sitting there thinking, okay, great, I like that, and how am I going to use this today in my life, in my business? Then we get into any questions, learnings, discoveries, questions. Here, then we get to the motivational close. So the motivational close, we know from previous Facebook Lives that we have people who are motivated away from what they don't want and towards what they do want. And in a general audience, it's around about 50-50. So our motivational close has to demonstrate to people what they're able to avoid by doing what you're talking about and what they're able to get. Now, away from motivation, by its very nature, feels bad. So we wouldn't want to finish with that. So what we do is we fire off the away from first to get the traction. Then we do the towards to get the momentum. So here's the way that I actually structure this. Firstly, I tell them all the terrible things that will happen if, question, you don't do what I'm suggesting. Then, here are all the wonderful things that will happen when certainty you do ... what I'm suggesting. If it's just a motivational speech, presentation, etc., you're done there, you take your round of applause, your standing ovation, and you're out. If it's a sales presentation, then at the end of here, this is where you do the call to action, the close. And, jokingly, I always say there's only one closing question you'll ever need if you've done this correctly. Forget Zig Ziglar's 1001 closing questions. There's only one closing question you'll ever need. Do you want it or what? And the answer will either be yes or it'll be no. So this is how we can do a perfectly structured presentation, training, speech for everybody's learning style straight off the bat by remembering 5 questions in this particular order. And I use this for like a 10-minute keynote to a 2-week master practitioner training. Every single element within the master practitioner training is a format. You can think of this as being like a building brick, like a Lego brick. So every single segment within the master practitioner training, which is 14 days, is built with one of these. So, okay, now I'm going to teach you about prime concerns. This is why you'd want to learn about prime concerns. Here's the theory. Let me do a demo. Okay, off you go, do an exercise. Learnings, discoveries, questions. Here's what will happen if you don't use prime concerns. Here's what will happen when you do. Great. Next Lego brick. Now, we're going to talk about neurodrivers. This is why you'd want to learn about neurodrivers. This is why you'd want to use neurodrivers. So every single segment is built as a particular format, Lego brick. 2-week training, 1-week training, 3-day training, even 3 weeks training if we're looking at NLP trainers training. It's also how we lay out our website, pages on our websites, because people are seeking for those answers to those 4 different questions. It's the way we lay out our brochures. But here's an interesting one for you to leave you with. When I read books, and as many of you know, I devour books since I learned photo reading, then I am asking these 4 questions whilst I'm reading the book. Why would I want to do this? Why wouldn't I want to do this? What's the information? What's the theory? What's what does the expert think? How can I use this right now? What will happen if I don't? What will happen if I do? So when I'm reading a book or listening to an audio or doing any kind of research, I'm asking myself these questions of the information coming in, which means that what I'm doing is I'm installing the information in the format system, which then makes it very, very easy to get this back out again to be able to transfer it to somebody else, which obviously is vital in my profession as a speaker, a presenter, and a trainer. If you want to find out more about the format system that I've been able to cover in this evening's Facebook Not Live, then you can find it in my app, my training and development app. If you go to the website www.davidshephard.com, then you'll find information about being able to download the app and being able to subscribe to the app. And there is a product in there, an audio video product in there, which is my world-renowned Presenting Magically. And there's a whole CD about the format system in Presenting Magically on the David Shephard app. So thanks for joining me this evening on my Facebook Not Live. Not sure if we'll be live or not next week, because next week we're doing our Speakers of Influence, and we might be right in the middle of an exercise or whatever. But I'll make sure that we get some new content up for you for David Shephard's Facebook Lives. Everything you've ever wanted to know about NLP, hypnosis, timeline therapy, and HUNA, but either didn't know who to ask or were afraid to ask. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you next week.